and talk mostly about Elaine. Elaine then is going to read from her award-winning story, The Genetic Alchemist's Daughter. And then we would love to open up, like we were saying earlier, to just a general conversation between all of us with Elaine about her work, about speculative fiction in general, about, I guess, whatever we really want to talk about, right? Haunted houses. I know that Elaine has thoughts on these things. So insects, that's one thing I want to talk about. And so we'll do that. Hopefully some of you will turn your cameras on. I'm already seeing some faces. It's wonderful to have faces and names put together. So if some of you are willing to do that, at least later during the Q&A, that's awesome. Otherwise, we will just enjoy your little black boxes. So, all right then. So again, I want to thank you all for being here today. And I want to thank the Georgia Tech Library for hosting this event. As some of you know from our casual chat just a few moments ago, this is the final official event in our celebration of 50 years of science fiction at Georgia Tech. And yes, indeed, we have been doing science fiction studies at Georgia Tech since 1972. My predecessor, Bud Foote, was one of the first people to teach science fiction classes for university credit. And today we have over 6 faculty in 2 different departments teaching across the speculative genres and across media. We also have a science fiction studies minor. We have graduate courses in science fiction, fantasy, and folklore, and a world-class science fiction collection. And in fact, as part of that development collection, we've been really honored to house the papers of award-winning speculative fiction author and DragonCon director Eugie Foster. This year, we're pleased to then celebrate our half centennial and to honor Eugie's artistic legacy with this special event featuring the 2021 Eugie Award winner, Elaine Cuyegkeng. Elaine was born in Manila, the Philippines, where there are many, many creaky old houses with ghosts inside them. See, I told you, she has things to say to us. She loves eusocial creatures, both real and imaginary, 80s pop stars, and caffeinated drinks with too much sugar. She lives in Melbourne, has been published in the Bram Stoker-winning anthology Black Crane's Tales of Unquiet Women, on the award-winning horror podcast Pseudopod, in Strange Horizons, a marvelous online science fiction magazine I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and in many other venues, including Lackington's The Dark and Rocket Copra. You can find her on Twitter and on Facebook. I can drop her information in later if anyone would like me to do that. I've talked for more than enough, and I know you're all excited to hear Elaine win and then to get a chance or to hear Elaine read from her award-winning story. And then we were excited to hear her win as well. It's all great. And then to get a chance to talk with her. So that I hope you'll all join me now in welcoming Elaine. We might have a quiet like Zoom thing. Otherwise, we can just all visually applaud. All right, take it away, please.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming in for an evening event. And I'm going to read an excerpt from The Genetic Alchemist Daughter. She dreams of death and rebirth on her mother's table. The smell of antiseptic, chemicals, artificial cherries, and other fruit. The specimen on the table. Herself, slipping a needle under the specimen's skin to obtain samples for reconstruction. Finally, the disposal of the body, while the new one grows inside her crimson egg, kicking her little amphibian feet. Later, a telepathic matrix imparts an edited library of the prodigal's memories. This reinforces the desired traits, knitted carefully into the genome. In 12 days and 12 nights, there will be a single perfected being, working in the specimen's old room with only a vague, uneasy sense of time, of displaced time. There will be no official record, no trace of the original, save for the genetic profiles buried deep in her mother's libraries. Everyone dreams those strange, mundane dreams of themselves performing their daily rites. The genetic alchemist's daughter is no different. Why should she be? But still, Leto Alicia Chua Mercado wakes as if she were a child waking from a nightmare. Leto thinks, there are fragments of bone and marrow in her pajamas, in her blankets, her bed. For a moment, her hands are viscous with ruby red. The Genetic Alchemists. Leto is her mother's daughter, and so when she wakes, blinking out dreams in the pre-dawn, the day's business is the first thing that occupies her. Nothing in Leto's creation was left to chance. The same is true of Chua Mercado Genetic Alchemy. Below, the family's laboratories just hid the fruits of several lucrative contracts. Tiny mermaid embryos for a techno-prince's private aquarium, a new variant of winged cat, Bengal beauties, with jade eyes and leopard spots, jeweled peregrine's wings, luminous moths, ordered by an exclusive fashion house for their silk. There are the prodigals, the human specimens who will be delivered to their family's holdings, waking in the original's old room as if from a dream. And finally, there are little seraphim, tiny embryos swimming in their exorooms. The bulk of these are still ordered by foreign CEOs, grateful for the assurance of a verified offspring, grateful to be spared the inconvenience of caring for pregnant wives. One day, Leto's mother hopes, the world will be full of them. There will be no prodigals, no broken creatures in need of repair. Leto feels a tenderness for them. She doesn't know why. Perhaps it's their shared origins, the fact that she knows and they don't. Leto's mother scoffs at that. You're not a specimen. You're my daughter. But Leto has always been what she is, the girl with all the gifts. Ophelia Chua Mercado's irrefutable proof. All the world had seen Leto in her womb, the tiny crimson egg Ophelia created. It made Ophelia's fortune and her infamy. How the Manilero elite was scandalized. Ophelia had created Leto without the help of a husband, without the blessing of the Holy Apostolic Church or any church, simply because. Priests cried about the dissolution of the family from their cathedrals, pastors from their multi-million-dollar pulpits. But hereditary heads of state, foreign billionaires, Hollywood queens, all of them came clamoring for Ophelia's service. Leto's mother waits for her at the breakfast table. She is a slender woman, not beautiful, but magnificent. She has a cruel mouth, a hard face, a hooked nose, as if she truly were the witch the more poetic among the Manila elite call her. Her black hair falls in rivulets down her back. No matter the demands of the day, Ophelia Chua Mercado insists on taking this time, the time to sit down and have a meal with family. She didn't create a daughter just to neglect her. She prides herself in having better husbandry of children. On the table are buttered toast, salted duck eggs, slices of chilled fruit. Today's clients will need careful handling, Ophelia murmurs, handing her daughter the day's dossiers. I know you've managed them before, but darling, today I need you to resist the urge to gloat. Leto opens the dossiers. She understands the moment her eyes fall on the client's name. She doesn't smirk. She knows it's unladylike. Ever since she was a tiny thing, old enough to be presented in a sad little classroom with portraits of saints, every single one of her classmates had hated her. They called her soulless. They said, you don't have a papa. And yet over time, so many of them ended up on Leto's table. She carefully explained all the reasons why their families elected them for the procedure. She feels that they're owed an explanation, but she can't help feeling some satisfaction. She had never disappointed her mother. Not one prodigal, Ophelia says, sipping her tea, but 3. Can you imagine that, darling? Imagine if they'd come to us from the beginning. It would have spared them so much trouble. It's an old, old story. It is the puzzle that so familial dynasties have tried to resolve. How does one halt a decline that seems to seep in the 3rd, 4th generation? 16, 18, 20 years old, and their beloved offspring showed signs of delinquency, addiction, general malaise, rebellion, depression of all things. They showed poor scholarship. How does one save a child from themselves? 18 years of Mandarin lessons, ballet or music, and Catholic school didn't fix them. The church and the promise of heaven can't fix them. Manila might have been horrified by Ophelia, the woman who made a daughter. But as the decades passed, one by one, they crept to Ophelia's door and begged her for her help. They turned to her genetic alchemy, and over the years, a whisper network has formed between desperate, gossiping mothers, patriarchs over games of golf and exquisite lunches. Leto feels her fingers itch, thinks of the discarded original, turning to ash in the furnace while a new, tiny creature emerges whole from Leto's artistry. All her fellow heirs have always hated her. But here she is anyway, granting them a gift unbidden. They will never even know. Her mother rises and kisses her cheek. Good hunting, my sweet girl, Ophelia murmurs, and Leto blushes. Her mother knows her, inside and out, better than she knows herself. And that is the end of the excerpt. Thank you, everybody. Sorry, guys, you're on mute.
I thought I had hit unmute and it did not unmute. So let's try that again. Okay, this time you can all hear me. All right, thank you so much. That was really great. So again, this was really wonderful, and we just really want to open this up to the audience. So let me ask students, other people who are visiting with us here at Georgia Tech tonight, would anyone like to start? Believe me, Catherine and I could carry this all night, but that's boring for you. This is your chance to talk. So,
hi guys.
I have a question.
Hi, Henry.
Great.
Cool.
So I've read a couple of your other stories, and I have noticed that you write a lot about, like social insects, and especially there's a lot of like butterfly and the silkworm type imagery. And so I was just curious, like, what is your relationship with those kinds of insects?
To be honest, I just think they're really cool. I am really themes of transformation. I'm really enthralled by them, and because it's so integral to insects themselves and their life and their life cycle. They're just the perfect vehicle for that, and they're such they really are such alien life forms, and they're also perfect for horror, let's be honest. The parasite butterfly larvae in one of my short stories. Remind me again. In one of my I think that was
the first of her name, is that the one?
Yes.
Thank you for reminding me. But yeah, they are really creepy. So they're wonderful for exploring horror and science fiction. They're wonderful for exploring body horror as well. So I guess that's why that's why so many of them come into my work. But I also really love eusocial insects because I guess for a lot of science fiction, there's a lot of tendency, I think, to portray collectives and gestalts as evil entities, and you can see that in the Borg, the Zerg, if you're a geek like me and you played StarCraft. It's just, and I guess it's a way, I guess eusocial insects, they're just a way for me to explore to explore collectives and eusocial. This is just something that they are. It's not that they are, and it's very, it may be really alien to us, but it's not, it's not it's not intrinsically it's not intrinsically an evil trait.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Henry, I'm so glad you asked that because I wanted to ask a question about the insects too. And I think your point that it's so many of these different social and transformative insects is, as Elaine said, I mean, that makes so much sense. It is perfect for like the body horror of science fiction or of horror, like the bursting out, things bursting and punctured and gross and oozing. Yeah, that works. All right, I see we have, boy, we're getting some questions here. I'm gonna just go through in the chat and start reading questions. If anyone else wants to jump in, is there a raise hand function on here? Catherine, where is it? Do you know?
Is there, yes, there is. So we're hosts, so it looks a little different, but I think it should be near the chat for everyone, or it's either in your reactions, which should be along the bottom.
It's in the reactions, right?
Yep, Rachel just did it.
Okay, great. So that way too, if anyone wants to make sure that, because if you want to talk out loud, I'm happy to read for you. It's wonderful to have you turn on your camera and chat too. But let's take one from the chat right now. And I had a question from, I think it's from Braden. And this is something that we actually talked about quite a bit in class. So I am curious to hear too. So Braden asks, well, Leto does get her form of rebellion and revenge at the end. Did you ever think that a different ending, or did you ever think about a different ending for the story, or maybe a different form of rebellion, maybe a more direct revenge against her mother, anything like that? We were really intrigued with the end. We talked about it a lot.
I actually hadn't thought of a different end. No, that's not true. I thought of different ways how it might end, and they all ended really badly for Leto. So this was this was, I hope, a way for her to to exercise her agency, even though I hadn't really like the way in the story itself, I hadn't really it didn't really get to the point where she got to directly confront her mother about what she had actually been doing to Leto, and that breach of trust that Leto thought that that they had. I would like to revisit Leto and her world and her different selves one day. Like I would really like to. I would really like to do that. But that's probably another project down the line. Like I think it would be a really interesting structure wise to follow Leto with all the different selves, and what led to the different breaches between herself and her mother, and what led to her quietly to make this current version of Leto, or even if Leto maybe has other selves running around that she doesn't know about. But yeah, I hope to explore that one day in another project.
I think that's really exciting. And I think that you can tell who the professional author is here, because we gamed a bunch of endings, and these are all, I mean, no offense class, but these are all, I think in some ways more exciting than many of the ones we imagined. So
no, tell me please.
Some of them are the same, some are the same, but the clones, I love that they're still out there, some of them, that the multiple Letos might still could be more than one at once. I love that. So I know which one I'm voting for you to write. All right, so anyways, I don't, Thomas, let's go back to a live question. Thomas, you've got your hand up. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, hello. I was just more of a general question. I was just wondering, when did you start writing stories? And it can be either like as a hobby or even like more in a professional, like as your job kind of way. I just wondered, like, at what age did you begin like doing this?
Okay, like I've always written as a kid, but I've always, struggled to I've always struggled to finish to finish work. I think I didn't start writing professionally, I think, until I was in my mid-20s. I found my writing group, the Arctic Pandas, and like I highly recommend, guys, if you are pursuing writing, find your people and find your group, because I think because that level of support does make a difference. And it's just good generally to have, to have friends who are on this journey with you. I think I published the first of her name. My sense of time is really terrible. That was long ago. But that was the first, that was my first semi. No, wait, I published with Rocket Capper was actually my first maybe semi-professional short story. And then maybe like years after, I published the first of her name a couple of years after that. So really, maybe my early to mid 20s, I started selling short stories, and it had kind of gone to the point where I was like, oh well, I'll just send stuff off. So the acceptances was like a very present. Oh yes, I can do this. Awesome. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
I think that's great advice about the writing group. Oh my goodness, everyone I know who finds one is always so happy. So that's, I have heard that before for sure. So I'm going to go back now to a question in the chat, which we sort of have touched on it, but I actually, not entirely, this is May has a question that's a follow-up to Braden's question for you, Elaine. And in your opinion, as you've constructed the story, do you think Leto can ever be free? Can she get free of the sort of system that she's been raised? And I guess we mean, I'm not going to say, just can Leto be free? That's a good question.
In my head, I think Leto definitely can, because in all of her selves, it has always reached, in all of herself, there's always been this point where she has taken steps towards agency, and where she has kind of and where she's kind of had this breach with her mother. So I think that there is that hope that she is moving towards that she in herself, she's always moving towards that freedom slowly. Yeah.
In each iteration, I love that. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, we've got two hands up. I'm just going to go in the order I saw them. So Maya, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, so hi. I was curious, like, what media influenced you to write The Genetic Alchemist Daughter? Whether that's like, television shows or movies or other science fiction works.
I'm so glad you asked. I really loved I guess I don't know if it comes through, but I really loved Orphan Black. So that show did heavily influence The Genetic Alchemist Daughter, but also Westworld. There's Westworld, not the there's this like the beginning of the show still really haunts me. Like, when Dolores wakes up and then she goes through her loop, dies at the end of the day, and then wakes up that the next day, not remembering anything that happened previously, and then her entire arc, I guess, of even though she doesn't remember anything of her past life, eventually they all catch up with her, and that does allow her to break free, of the loop and the narrative that she was trapped in. So that that story did heavily influence The Genetic Alchemist's Daughter, and in Orphan Black as well, the sense of all of the girls, of the leader clones, trying to break free of someone else's control, and Rachel Duncan in particular, because of all of them, she's the one who's the most closely aligned to the institution that's trying to hold, that tries to keep control of the ghost. And it was really interesting watching her character develop, like why she felt so loyal to this system that caused her so much grief, that separated her from the people that she loved and care about, and to see that going full circle where she did separate herself from that, and that was really powerful to me. Hello?
Oh, we needed to mute someone who had just entered the room.
Oh,
Okay, we're good. Please keep talking.
Yes. I think, was there some...
Yeah, Killian, I think you've got your hand up next.
Yeah. So one of the things that I noticed is all of your stories really seem to focus on the biological sciences, in like, which I especially noticed in the what is the constellations? These constellations will be yours. Yeah. And I found it really interesting how, you know, it is the oraculas which allow the space travel rather than any sort of mechanical technology.
Yeah.
Made me think of Dune a lot in that way. And I was curious what kind of pushed you towards those avenues of technological innovation.
I'm going to be really honest. The biological sciences were always the coolest ones to me. Yeah. Yeah, but they were always the coolest ones to me. But also, like, I really loved that aspect of it, that you needed the human element to be able to travel between the stars. And with the oraculars, because these constellations will be yours is, you know, a science fiction. It's a fairy tale retelling basically of Filipino of Spanish colonialism of the Philippines. And one aspect of colonialism that I really wanted to explore was human beings as being turned into capital, like with the galleon trade, and that was central to that was central to you know, the Spanish Empire, and, you know, the Philippines' value to that empire. They used, you know, Filipino labor to construct those ships. They used Filipino navigators and to man those ships. And this was conscripted labor, basically slave labor, and not everyone, you know, quite a number of people didn't necessarily survive that labor, and you know, and this was, you know, in the service of, you know, creating wealth for that empire. So I really so through the oraculars, I really wanted to explore, you know, that really horrific aspect of empire and colonialism.
I love too how that story is narrated by someone who's very much been co-opted into this system, and it's an interesting narrative standpoint as well. So yeah, thanks. That's cool. Okay.
I can't get everyone's hand, but there are a number of questions in the chat as well.
There are. I was going to start reading those off next. I was going to go to those. So let's go here. All right. So we're going to jump back to a bigger question for a minute then. And Ellie Ralston wants to know, she says, you've mentioned that you've been writing stories for a long time. Were you always interested in science as well? In other words, what led you to the genre of science fiction specifically?
In a really roundabout way, fan fiction. I was really into the X-Men as a young adult. I think because a lot of X-Men deals with, you know, with a lot of the themes that I guess are in my stories, you know, transformation, potential body horror, and I got into this X-Men RPG group, and this was an AU, so we were all creating you know, a lot of X-Men is very, you know, American centric, but in this group, you know, we were all from, you know, different parts of the world. So, you know, I made a Filipino version of one of the X-Men, and other people were doing it, and other people were doing similar things, creating like making alternate versions of the X-Men with from their background. And someone and one of them, who was a Filipino, actually introduced me to Dean Francis Alfar's stories. he wrote he wrote The Kite of Stars, and I read it, and it was this really beautiful fairy tale story that was set in the Philippines, and it was a woman who went on a quest to turn herself into a kite of stars, to, I don't know, as you know, as it was a quest of love for an astrologer that she fell in love with. It was, and it was amazing. And I realized, I guess for the first time, that I could write stories about Filipino culture, Filipino history, and that was something that was possible. So I guess that's what I guess that's how it started for me.
That is, wow, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
That was a very roundabout explanation.
No, this is great. I have a feeling that students, does that like not work super well with everything we've been talking about, to have all of that? Yeah, everyone's like, okay, yeah, this is all very useful. So, oh my gosh, amazing, thank you. Let's go on. You're right.
Put it down, Catherine. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So we have a lot more questions here. Let me go. Okay. So we're going to go back to now a more specific story about the Genetic Alchemist Daughter. And this is from Zorab. And he wants to know, what part of the story did you have the hardest time writing? Also, how long does it usually take you to complete a whole story?
The ending is always the most difficult part of the story for me to land. So I am really, really thrilled that this story worked so well for so many people. That I wrote it while I was on maternity leave, and really pregnant with my daughter. So I could at that stage devote quite a bit of time to it. I think it, like the themes of the story percolated in me for maybe a couple of years, but the story itself I wrote in maybe a week, the first draft. But again, that was because I could devote that much time to it, and that's not always possible for me right now. I like for me to complete a story and a short story, I kind of have to write around work, and also my daughter's schedule, which is a bit of a challenge. Like usually most days she, like, sometimes she'll wake up at 4 o'clock. She's slowly getting into this schedule where she'll wake maybe at 6 or 6:30. So I wake up at 4 and I write what I can until maybe she wakes up at 5:30, 6. So it's Pomodoro. So I guess it's a Pomodoro technique on speed, like just until she wakes up. So it does really kind of depend how long it takes for me to finish a short story, depending on what's going on.
All right, good, thank you so much. All right, there's a list of them here, so I'm going to go. So now Maggie, I know we're going to keep going. Now Maggie has a question, and we're getting back to the Genetic Alchemist Daughter. And Maggie asks, well, this is a science fiction story. I feel like it could be a very feasible future. I was just wondering what your thoughts on that would be, especially since Leto has mixed feelings about her origins.
And yeah, so I guess it is a really dystopian it is a really dystopian story, and I hope that that kind of thing that doesn't come to pass. Like that we learn I feel really I feel really strongly about this, especially after my daughter was born. I hope that we learn, as children come into the world, I hope we learn to accept them as they are, and support and love them unconditionally. I also know that we kind of live in a nightmare dystopia in a lot of ways, where people do where I think our worst where, you know, it is possible for us to give in to our worst impulses, I guess. But I hope that but no, I really hope that would not be the case. What I do like about some of what Ophelia is doing is there is the exowombs, where it is possible for women to, you know, not be pregnant, to have their child, you know, in this safe little egg nest, and they don't have to suffer the effects of pregnancy, and that is a big game changer, because pregnancy is a really physical, taxing thing for women, and taxing thing for women. And like I was barely functional in the first couple of months of pregnancy with my daughter, and I think a lot of people underestimate how much that that does put a toll on women. And for a lot of women as well, pregnancy can be really life-threatening. And I think, you know, something like the exowombs, if we could develop something like that, I think at least that part of Ophelia's technology and her work, that would be really good for us to have.
You know, the first generation of women who were writing commercial science fiction in the 1920s, at a point when maternal mortality and infant mortality was super high everywhere, right? You see a lot of stories about that too. And it's still, I think, like you said, very much a dream we have to solve that kind of suffering. That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you.
Are they available in the archives of Georgia Tech?
They are, and actually some are in. I'll talk to you later about this. I've reprinted a bunch of them in the anthologies I've been editing, which is how I found them. So I would let you and I talk later about that. But for now, I want to let everyone else talk, because you and I can chat whenever. Let's go back to a live question for a minute, and then we'll go back into the. Oh my gosh, they're flying through the chat. But let's let Catherine go for a minute, because I know Catherine has a lot of questions too. Let's let her get one in.
Well, I'm asking my question because you mentioned. I'm curious, you mentioned that you wrote this on maternity leave. And it really struck me, this central theme in the story being about motherhood, or being about being a daughter, and the perfection in both of those roles. And I'm curious if that was purposeful, if that's what you were trying to tell a story about, or if maybe it just kind of came out organically.
It came out. It came out organically. I wrote this for Black Cranes, because Lee and Geneve, who are Lee Murray and Geneve Flynn, who are the editors of that anthology, they were looking, you know, specifically for short stories by Southeast Asian writers, and it was and they were for ways, I guess, for us to subvert that idea of that idea of perfection that we're meant to carry out, that we're perfectly dutiful daughters, we are perfectly we're perfectly dutiful mothers. I guess when I grew up in the in the Chinese diaspora in the Philippines, and I think one of the things about a lot of immigrant and diaspora communities, that there's a really strong pressure for us to be, not just to I guess to carry out the dreams of our families, to be to perform certain modes of excellence, and that comes from I guess that comes from a real sense of anxiety and a very and from love as well, because there is a sense for a lot of diaspora courage that if you don't perform, if you don't I guess make yourself, you know, useful to I'm going to get my angry millennial on. If you don't make yourself useful to, you know, the capitalist machinery that, you know, we are part of, then there is a sense that, you know, things will go very badly for that child. So I think that's where a lot of that anxiety comes from. So I grew up, so I kind of you know, grew up familiar with that. I grew up familiar with that mindset. I guess like a lot of my friends growing up, we experienced it, and there was a lot of pressure for us, you know, to be to be good students and to be perfect and to perform well. And I guess all of those elements made their way into the story. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I'm going to jump to a chat question, then I'll get to Henry online, and then we'll go back to another chat question. And this is a question from Will, and I love it because I'm a trained English person. This is such a great lit question. Is there a connection between your Ophelia and Ophelia from Hamlet, and between your Leto and Leto from Greek mythology? I know Ophelia from Hamlet is usually seen as a tragic feminine figure, and that Leto is a goddess of femininity, motherhood, and a protector of children. But is there are there other reasons that you chose these names, or were these reasons? Where did you get the names from?
That's a really amazing question. Thank you, Will. Because Ophelia, the name itself means snake, and the snake itself, you know, is strongly connected to medicine and the sciences. So yeah, that felt like the right name for that character. And Leto, I know it's not a very usual name, but Leto, I think, is the mother of, Leto in Greek mythology is the mother of Apollo and Artemis. And I guess in Leto, Ophelia saw the possibility of a new world in her daughter, like the birth of a new world, and that was why she named her that. I hadn't considered any other names. It's really hard at the beginning to think of just the right names for that character, and they have to be right before I start the story, because otherwise then it becomes set in stone, and if it does, and if if the names you pick just don't work for that character, so for me, it does. The names I pick have to be absolutely right for the character from the get-go.
Thank you. I love knowing that. I've been lecturing to the students all semester on the importance of names in genre fiction, and I'm right. I told you people. It's been proven by a real live author. Now you don't even have to trust me. You can trust someone else. All right. So Henry, why don't you go ahead and then we'll jump back to the chat.
Okay. I really liked your story, The Widow and the Princess of the Duende. And
thank you, Henry.
I noticed it was full of so many like cool different mythological elements. And I really like the whole idea of the vampires being like these religious figures. And so I'm curious, like, where did you draw the inspiration for that story?
You're asking me to go back many yes. I guess like at the time I was kind of playing with this idea with this, this alternate world, I guess, where where the colonial oppressors were literal monsters, and that was literal blood-sucking parasitic monsters, so I guess that was where the inspiration for the Friars came from. And with the widow and her daughters, and the insects, I really, and the ant colony, I really also like this idea that you know, that the different native different native creatures were also finding ways to resist through collaboration and through symbiosis. And yeah, and I guess, you know, you can see that symbiosis and become is a big thing in my work as well. So yeah, that is that was how that story I guess came together.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a question that comes actually from two different people. So from both Maggie and Catherine, they were really fascinated by your discussion of how Filipino culture has influenced your writing. And they're both wondering if there are other cultural or literary, historical, any other influences that you really feel, you know, inspire your work.
Yeah, I'm really interested in oh, hello, Katie. We have someone else who's just come in. I guess I love reading a lot of nonfiction. And in particular, I've been reading, you know, a lot of you know, I love reading a lot of stories about, you know, the Spanish Empire, and the Russian and the Russian Empire. And I guess you might see that in these constellations will be yours, where ballet is really central to ballet is really central to the world, and that culture. It's not fully conscious to me, but I guess reading about other empires and other cultures, all of that, you know, finds their way into my work.
Cool. All right, great, thank you. As someone who trained in ballet for a while, I liked the idea of a future where ballet was like a politically important way of like, or an important way of contributing to like political discourse. That's just fantastic. And I think most ballet dancers would laugh heartily at that idea, but also really love it. So May has a more technical question for you and asks, what do you think are the elements that are necessary for a successful short story as opposed to a longer work like a novel?
Elements for a successful short story.
Yeah.
Like I think it has, you have to have a really cohesive, you really have to have a very cohesive narrative from the get-go. Like you have, like it has to be, because it's such because you have a much smaller space. I think you can only really tell the one story and focus on the one theme in a short story, as opposed to being able to explore, you know, so many other subsets and really deep and deeper world building that you can in a novel.
Just a follow up then what parts would you cut out of a story? Like if
sorry,
what parts would you cut out of a story if you're trying to make it short and like impactful?
I guess like I would have to decide for myself what the main theme of my story was. Who was the main protagonist of that story, and then, you know, work from there. Like with these constellations will be yours. Like I didn't have space for anything other than you know, the galleon ship and her evolving relationship with the dancer, and her mother figure, Madre Eglantine. Like I wanted to focus specifically on her changing relationship to those to those two figures in her lives, and specifically because those two figures are also about her relationship to the empire. That was the main theme. So I guess even though I had those two sub threads, they were really telling, like those two narratives were really telling the same story, if that makes sense. So I think you have to be really conscious of that when you're writing your short story, or like what specific thread you want to untangle and pull, and whether I guess any additional anything else you have, whether that's helping you tell that main story.
Okay, thank you so much.
No worries. I hope that makes sense. I'm really sorry. I'm probably rambling a bit now.
Well, we've been running you hard for a while. We have just two more questions in the chat, and then if anyone got a last thing, well, one of them is a great wrap-up question. So Zora, I want to save your question for the end because I think it's a lovely wrap-up. And Catherine actually wanted to follow up a little bit on the question she and Maggie had. She really appreciated, says, thank you for explaining big things that inform you, but I'm curious about this sort of everyday influences. Are there things that you come across in routine life or that you dream about that work their way into your fiction?
Okay, ballet is probably the biggest the biggest thing that comes across in my work, and it's I guess like with everything else, ballet is just this really beautiful art form, and it's really it's really like I can't I guess like with my writing, I guess writing can't come close to the the immediacy and the physical beauty of ballet. It's more it's more of a cerebral thing, but when I'm writing, I try really hard to have the same I really want my writing to have the same musicality, the same beauty that that a ballet or a piece of choreographed work has, and I hope that does that does come across, that when you're reading it, I just want people people to feel a bit of the same the same impact that you would feel watching a ballet. One of the things I like to do while I'm working, and baby permitting, while I'm working, one of the things I like to do while I'm drafting is have ballet is have morning class for a lot of ballet companies running in the background, and that's really that's really meditative to me, to see other people focusing on their artwork, artwork and their art form, like that's really inspiring to me. So and I hope a little bit of that beauty and that emotiveness does come through in my writing.
I think, as you can see, everyone's nodding, that I think we all agree that it does. That is so cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love that idea. And students, as you go to your final projects, thinking about how you can transform one art form into another is something that maybe some of you can pursue in your final projects. So not to talk about final projects, but just to talk about final projects. And speaking of final things, it looks like, it feels like we're coming towards a natural wrap up here. The questions are coming a little less rapidly. And Zorab has a wonderful question that I think might be a lovely way to wrap up, and asks, can we know more about upcoming stories that you're currently working on, or maybe even thinking about working on?
Oh yeah, sure. So I have I'm currently working on a haunted boarding school for mermaids. And yes, so that's my dark academia. That's my contribution to academia. Yeah, and I'm also working on a short story about a ferryman who travels through all of these small haunted islands and different isles of the dead. So yeah, and I'm also working on a sequel to These Constellations Will Be Yours. A novel. So yeah, it's a novel that takes place 100 years after the events of that short story. So yeah, that's the stuff that I'm working on at the moment.
Wow, that's really cool. Thank you. I'm excited. I'm so excited that you're doing a novel out of that particular universe. Yeah, so is Henry. Everyone's very happy about that. Cool. So yeah, I see. Yeah. Oh, that's so great. Thank you. So as you can see, we're getting a lot of thank yous now. So Killian says, I was absolutely floored by These Constellations Will Be Yours, and just wanted to thank you for putting it out into the world. Can't wait to see more of your work, especially now that we know there will be a sequel. I agreed. And then May also, I think this is lovely. I just want to share it with everyone. May says, I just wanted to say that I love this story, The Genetic Alchemist Daughter. You added so many elements: genetically perfect offspring, powerlessness of women in a patriarchal society, the duty of children to their family, disappointing such expectations, layers of entrapment and horror, and somehow it fits together seamlessly. I especially love Leto. She's genetically engineered to be her mother's heir and nothing else, but she still has emotions and desires: smugness when she thought she was the best and never disappointed her mother, justice for charity, harmony and faith, etc. Basically, I think she's such an amazing character. Thank you so much for saying that it's possible for Leto to be free. I wanted so much for her to be free and happy.
Okay, thank you, May. That's really lovely. Yeah, wow, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for writing the story. Like, I love the story.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
And class, I think that as we begin, we move into our final unit on fantasy fiction, on Thursday. And I think one of the things we might think about it is, let's go back through now and let's look at the fantasy elements, especially in light of this conversation, right? I think we've done a lot with the science fiction. We've done a lot with the horror. Let's go now and look at some of the sort of more hopeful elements in that story as well, which is, I think, where we all wanted to go anyway with it. So again, I think, this is a wonderful place to wrap up. Thank all of you for being here with us tonight. I want to thank Elaine for your wonderful reading and your gracious conversation with all of us. I want to thank the Eugie Award Committee. Matthew, thank you for being here for tonight and this is Matthew Foster, who is the brains behind the Eugie Award. And it was his idea that made it possible, essentially, for us to have Elaine here tonight. I want to thank the Georgia Tech Library, Allison, Catherine. As always, you are rock stars, and you've made this such a wonderful experience for us all. And as always, thank you to my own school, Literature, Media, and Communication, for keeping it real with science fiction for 50 years now. So thank you all, and good night, or good morning, depending on where you are. All right, bye, everyone.